Next, we're going to talk about the progressive endorsements. Some people say that endorsements don't really matter that much, but as we can see from this past cycle, progressive leaders' endorsements do matter. And it can make all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. We see, when the establishment gets behind their candidate, we see what happens, right? We talked in the past with how, late the endorsement came from Charles, whereas Amy, the establishment got behind super early. We don't know what will happen there. We see now the effect, good or bad, that Pelosi endorsement of Kennedy had, right? I think it may backfire on her some way because that kind of like energized the progressive movement to kind of like, okay, well, you want to be a Speaker of the House and you want to go against your own policy. We're just going to get energized. So it may work, it may not, but again, like they are always the one that take the first shot and they don't really care what the Progressive Party really thinks. They go into support their candidates. And the problem that I have with the progressive movement, especially with those candidates that we have and all of them, is that we really don't understand their concept when it comes to like endorsement and how they go about it. But I know for sure is that we don't never get behind our candidates unless we really think they have a good chance of winning, and we just get to it really, really late, right? So whereas the establishment, they don't really care. They just like, they know that's their candidate. They're going to fall behind. And we always talk about how do we change? How do we make change? Oh, we got to primary everyone. We got to primary everyone. But every time that we primary someone, those folks that are there, they don't really get behind the candidates, right? So when we look at Jen versus Debbie in Florida, right? She didn't get no backing. Somebody, Debbie before didn't really have any challenge. I don't see any progressive movement really going behind her. If we look at Jessica in Delaware versus Chris Coon, right? Where's the progressive endorsement there? You have someone really challenging this, establishment Democrat that been there for. I think he didn't even get his. I think he been there. He finally got one turn. But before, I think he got the Biden seat when Biden was vice president, or something like that. So, but Chris Coon got like $5 million compared to Jessica's $200,000.
Yeah.
But you don't really like get behind her. Like, I don't see anyone trying to. So how really are we going to supposedly make the change that we do if our fierce leaders, really don't get behind our candidates unless it's really, really, really late?
Yeah,
I think one reason for that is because they scare them. They tell them, "Hey, you're supposed to just support the incumbent," but then they go around and they pretty much lie, be hypocrites, like what's happening with Kennedy and Markey right now. So they want to progressives. I think we try to follow the rules, we try to be nice or whatever. Meanwhile, whoever's in power, whether it's the Democrats or Republicans, they just do whatever they need to do to win.
Yeah.
So when we are told, okay, we're not supposed to rock the boat too much, this is not the way we do it, leave the incumbents or whatever, we follow that until now we see Pelosi being a two-faced and endorsing a challenger to an incumbent. So it's like, all right, I hope this is the wake-up call. I hope this is going to let progressive candidates know, like, just endorse whoever you want and don't worry about it.
So this is where it comes in that we got to organize, man. We hear stories of the establishment, what I would call, they have a pre-primary, right? Where they, among the donors and among the establishment, they decide who do they want to run. Sometimes we don't realize that they can be disorganized as well. And actually we saw that in the presidential election on the Democratic side, where they had like a good 8 or plus, establishment who were running, and all the donors had their own horse, right? But when it came time to consolidate, they consolidate and they get behind whoever they want. There's also stories of the leaders who would try to prevent progressives, or maybe not just progressives, but certain people from running against those incumbents. I know Alex Morris, he said that he spoke to somebody before when he was thinking about running, and they try to convince him not to run. And that happens frequently. So these guys get organized. They know who they want. They push out whoever else is trying to join the race. And then they raise as much money. That's how you know that they show their hand when you see who's the person with the most amount of money going into an election. That's how you know that they're most likely with the donors, right? Yeah. So go ahead, John.
People are getting hip to it. They see when Pelosi endorses Kennedy. They said that was the second best fundraising day for the Markey campaign period. Yeah. So it's one of those things that when Hillary Clinton endorsed the guy in the Bronx, that he started going downhill after there also. Yeah. So it's one of those things where people are starting to wake up and see it. And on the progressive side, we also need to. It's been a one-way street when it comes down to, are you going to endorse the candidate? We always no problem. We will. We're just giving out our endorsements like candy. And on the flip side, they're plotting against us the whole time. So we have to withhold our endorsements. We talked about before in the past how Bernie gave his endorsement for free to Biden. Now Biden peaked early. Biden peaked back then. He got endorsements from everybody. And even his challenger, when he quit, immediately gave him his endorsement with no policy concessions. Yeah. And then what's happening? Biden's been playing since then the run the clock out game. And we saw how well that worked out for the Atlanta Falcons when they were up 28-3 in that big meme that we've all seen. And they ran out the clock all the way to a big loss. Yeah. And in this case, I'm hoping that it's not that, but it's looking every bit like 2016, where if you just try to run the clock out and you're going to end up being in trouble. And another endorsement I wanted to call out for Joe Kennedy in that race is Sharice Davids, which she was, for those who don't remember,
I remember.
She is a Native American LGBT woman who was elected as the representative in Kansas's 3rd district. And she actually beat Progressive Brent Welder, who's famous now as a representative campaign, a representative in the DNC and the policy committees. She beat him in the primary with all the backing of the corporate establishment. So it goes to show you hear Native American LGBT woman, man, she must be like a progressive beast if you just look at on paper. But you got to be aware of that. The establishment, and soon to be, I believe, the Republicans will start to weaponize this diversity to kind of make you put your guard down. Like, how could you go against a Native American LGBT woman? It's like you've already lost before you go in, because you could be accused of so many things: sexism, racism, everything, homophobia. So you can't really, it's hard to go against somebody like that. At the beginning, when Brent was in that race, he was dominating the race. He was outpolling the Republican by far. And then when they saw that he was polling so well, they brought in Sharice Davids to be the spoiler and take that race by like a razor thin margin. So in this case, you see the payback. What is the impact of that race? Now she's been in this role. She backs Joe Kennedy, who's a more establishment candidate than the representative, the incumbent, who's a progressive. And it just shows that what they're doing when they're backing these establishment candidates, they're going to get their payback later on in multiple different ways, with votes, and in this case with endorsements.
And I think that's what what the point I was trying to make. Like, it's like, we don't, like, when it comes to the Senate, it feels like, oh, well, I've been working with so and so for so long, and so is such a great partner. But then we go in and we're like, oh, we need to take money out of politics, and we got to do the super PAC. Like, for example, like, again, I go back to that race in Delaware, right, with Jessica Scarene, I think, sorry if I misspell her name, versus Chris Coon, right? Chris Coon, when you go to Open Secret, you see all the super PAC money. And he got $5 million. She's spending about $5 million, $3 million in this thing, whereas Jessica's only have 200,000. But if we really want to talk about, Medicare for all, Green New Deal, and when we have those candidates that believe in that, why are we not behind those candidates? Because we are afraid to hurt Chris Coon's feelings, right? Yeah. And so that's the only, when we ask, we always talk about this, like, we got to primary people. Yeah. We have to start at the local level. We got to start at the Senate level. We got to start Congress. But every single time we do it, it just feels like those big boys, you know, our big progressive movement, they don't fall behind our candidates. And that's the only way we're going to change it. So if we not really, you know, like you said before, the Senate is 6 years. So if we're not even like making we're taking a shot to really try to like take Chris Coons' seat, then that's another 6 years we got to wait for anything to happen.
So the one thing I would say is I do want to be wary in certain cases of just coming out outright and endorsing every single candidate off the bat, because you use a lot of political capital there. If you just go and blanket endorse everyone, including somebody who has absolutely no chance to win, it could be damaging, and it's hard enough to get any progressive legislation discussed. I think one idea that Case has brought up in the past is the progressive gauntlet, the people's gauntlet, where you go through and you have to talk about these issues. And if you back this policy, you don't necessarily need to wait for an AOC endorsement. You know, AOC endorses any candidates that pass the people's gauntlet of Medicare for all, et cetera. So I think that might be another way to get that without forcing somebody to go and endorse a candidate in a race that they have no chance of winning, and it's only could hurt them negatively. Now, there's also the danger of having potentially stopping any momentum. So if you have a candidate that if they had publicity, then maybe they would not viable. So I'm arguing against myself here, but that's the flip side, is that you could potentially give somebody the spark they need to go ahead.
Like, look at like that Kentucky race. It's the perfect example. Like, they didn't come in into, like, and again, we know that endorsement may work or may not work, right? But they didn't come in and fall behind Charles until they were like, oh, well, then maybe there's a shot. But Chuck, Nancy, and them, they were behind Amy day one. They didn't even know if she had a shot or not. But they get behind their candidate day one. So what I'm saying is, like, what's going to happen is then if I'm a progressive and I'm trying to run for office, I'm going to be like, well, my party really don't have my back. So it's like they're going to see I have no shot at beating this establishment candidate that been here for 18 years. So why waste my time?
Yeah. So on that point, I want to show a video of Ryan Grimm, and this is Rising, and they talk about possibly why Bernie Sanders didn't jump in the Markey Kennedy race.
Lined up behind Joe Kennedy, certainly Nancy Pelosi, and she brought a number of members of the House, including some House progressives, along with her. On the other side, so far, Bernie Sanders, correct me if I'm wrong, has declined to endorse Markey. Of course, I mean, Markey didn't endorse him in his presidential campaigns. I get that. But do you have any intel or any reporting on why Bernie has decided to stay neutral in this race, which, as you point out, is really critical symbolically to the left? And also, the Sunrise Movement has really gone all in for Markey because he went all in with the Green New Deal. Sunrise Movement also a really important part of the Sanders campaign. So just help us understand those dynamics and what your understanding is as to why Bernie is staying out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very Bernie Sanders move. You know, one of the things that people have been so critical of him over the years is his unwillingness to get into some of these primaries and to endorse people. You know, people close to him say that the way he describes it is that, you know, early in his career, a lot of people would come to him for endorsements. He would endorse them, and then they would get into office, and they would be lousy. And so he felt burned time after time, and he said, "So you know what? I'm not doing this anymore." Sanders has shown the ability to evolve into new ways of thinking strategically and tactically, and he was the only elected federal official to endorse Cori Bush against an incumbent, Lacey Clay. But you know, these are baby steps in some ways, and you know, it was surprising. You know, he serves with Ed Markey, and like you said, Bernie's most fervent supporters, you know, are all in. This is extremely important to them. And, you know, he decided to stay out, even in the face of Kennedy being able to rally the establishment behind him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one thing I will say is that, you know, I agree about the whole Markey thing. Like, we should have gotten that endorsement there. But we also have to keep in mind that, you know, there's a lot of times we don't know a lot about these candidates. We don't know their backgrounds. You know, you think about Shahid Buttar, however you feel about his allegations, you know, there's these things that come out later on when you're not fully vetting a candidate that, you know, you may get dinged for later on if you endorse. I mean, think about all of our own jobs, right? Like, we don't just recommend whoever, we have some kind of relationship with, to join our company. We have to vet them too, make sure that they're not going to put our name in bad vein. So these candidates, they're quote unquote employers all of America. I mean, if they put their name behind these candidates and then they turn out to be either like terrible candidates or they have, some kind of record behind them that we didn't know about before, that stains your name. And I can understand why sometimes they would want to withhold that until they know more about the candidate. And sometimes it's too late.
Someone did bring up that Ed Markey didn't endorse Bernie, so maybe he didn't feel obligated to endorse back. But I don't feel like that's his MO. I think there's something else there. I don't see a pattern of him pulling a Warren, Elizabeth Warren, where she could have easily endorsed him back in, between South Carolina and Super Tuesday, and she just refused to do it. So at this point, I would give Bernie a pass personally, just my intuition.
No.
Right? Go ahead, John.
Don't give that. We can't keep going, give Bernie a pass. It has to do, what I think it has to do was probably Eddie's not his friend. Remember, Joe is his friend.
Okay.
Eddie's probably not his friend. But we need to stop. We need to stop like giving Bernie passes. Bernie passes that already. At the end of the day, they like Easy says something that may be something we don't know.
Yeah.
But the way that you be like, you work with the guy and then you say, I'm going to stay out of it because he should know yes or nay. But then, you're going to stay out of it. But then all of a sudden, Joe is your friend and you're going to go endorse Joe day one.
Listen, I would say this. I think that Bernie still has an old way of thinking. I think he's like still in the dial-up like era where we have fiber optics, you know what I'm saying? In the sense that maybe he's getting his advice from the wrong people. I don't know if Jeff Weaver is still in his ear. There's ways that he should be able to vet people a little bit better when you got Justice Democrats, you got brand new Congress, you got other people who's also vetting. And once you see that a certain amount of groups have joined, you should at least join after that. And we see him and AOC not even doing that. So in that sense, I agree with you.
Yeah, there's something there though, because like Ryzen said, the Sunrise Movement, they endorsed, and AOC went all in on Ed too. So, and we know AOC doesn't endorse people, especially outside of New York like that. And
yeah.
If AOC endorsed and Bernie didn't, there's got to be something there that we don't know.
Well, we see that there's a relationship there, right? She came out with the Green New Deal. He was the one that jumped on board. So he took a risk in a sense. Cause he's got the establishment, or he's been there for a very long time. And at that point, AOC was kind of pariah. She, with the Green New Deal, she made a couple mistakes with the opening of it, like how she revealed it. There was a couple mistakes there and he took a chance. So maybe that's where relationships come in. That's where, you just talked about that. Maybe that's where that plays that point.
I would love for this politician to really kind of give us an understanding of their endorsement process, right? Because if you look, like I mentioned, Bernie was the only one that endorsed Cori Bush. AOC didn't, but AOC did last time. Mm-hmm. So, like, how do you endorse someone last time when they ran and then didn't endorse them this time? So I would really that's one thing that I would love to.
We need to get somebody on the inside on the show, man. I can't wait at one day. That's my dream, is to get somebody on the inside, even if they want to be anonymous, like somebody that tells us the kind of deals that get cut. It's so obvious to me that AOC before she was not even incumbent yet, so she could do whatever she wanted to. It's like Jamal Bowman. He endorsed Alex Morse because he's not in the House yet. But then once AOC got in the House and she started rubbing elbows with certain people, this is my speculation. This is not what I've heard at all. But, you get to build relationships with people. Maybe she knew, what's the guy's name? That's Cori Bush's opponent. Well, I can't. Lacey Clay. Maybe she developed a little bit of a friendly relationship with him. And that's all you need. We see with Bernie and Biden. All you need is some friendly relationship. And all politics go out the window.
Well, there's speculation too that the reason why Pelosi endorsed Kennedy is just because of the family relationship. Like the Kennedy's friendly with her family and then with her.
Exactly.
So, there's relationships outside of work that could influence your decision to endorse.
Yeah. And I think she said too that it was that Kennedy played a pivotal role on getting the house in 2018. Something.
He knows how to fundraise. He gets a lot of money.
Yeah.
So guys, let me know what you think. Have you heard of any, inside dealings, why people endorse, why not? Or what's your feeling about this? Even if it's just speculation, I would love to know. We would love to know with a comment below. All right.
Some juicy stuff.
Yeah, give us some. Even use your imagination. Who knows? Well, don't get too crazy in the comments because I have to delete you. All right.